Hello and welcome to Uncanny J-Men. We're back for another discussion on Moon Knight, this time on episode 4. Past the halfway point, we got another episode down and quite an episode this one.
Oh, yeah.
Led into some things that we've been discussing granted, we've been discussing a lot, but it led into one of the aspects that we kept on being like, is this going to happen this season? Is it going to happen? We saw some teasers towards it. But we'll get into that in a moment. Warning. Spoilers. We're discussing the entire episode, previous episodes, what we think may be coming in the future, comic book stuff. So if any of that is something you do not want to hear or you want to go see the episode first, go see it. Come back, join us for the discussion right after that.
Yeah, all you have to do is watch all the episodes, read every Moon Knight comic that's ever been made, and then come back.
Exactly.
Just kidding. Don't worry, I'm kidding.
We'll go over a lot of the stuff you might find interesting as well that we found. Granted, this Moon Knight has always been one that I haven't read a lot of. I've read Moon Knight, and I've read some of the bigger arcs of the comic books, but I was never an avid Moon Knight reader. It was more just so that I know what's going on for other series that he's been in.
Yeah, and similarly, I've always liked the character, and so I'll pick up things here and there, but I have not read every comic. He's not one of the big name ones, so it's more of, that's interesting. I'm in the mood for something different. I'll pick up a Moon Knight, but that's about it. So yeah.
And I've got a passing knowledge of Egyptian mythology, but luckily we have the internet, so I looked up a lot after this episode.
This is a different one for me. In each of our previous discussions, I'd watched the episode, I think 3 times each at least. This time, I just finished watching it for the first time, so this is fresh in my mind, and I'm still a little blown away by what I just saw.
Yeah. So let's get it. Let's introduce ourselves. I am JADe,
and I am Josh.
All right, let's get into the episode.
I'm good, Arrow guy. Let's go. Let's go.
I don't know if you want to jump around or go right from the beginning, but we start off with an action scene. Right. I mean, they've been doing that a lot to start off episodes, like where the last one ends, the next one starts, and it's right into action. Mm-hmm. So we see some people going after and trying to get them after they've rearranged the stars.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't notice anything particularly worthy of analysis in this, but it was a little surprising to me because the entire time I kept thinking, all right, here comes Jake. Here comes Jake. Here comes that third personality. He's going to pop out and he's going to take these bad guys out and he's going to save the day. And he never showed up. I actually made a bet with my wife because she's like, no, Layla is going to save the day. I'm like, no, it's going to be Jake. Jake is coming. Just you wait. I lost the bet.
I'm beginning to think they've been teasing Jake. Is he going to show up until the very last episode? He might not show up until the very last episode and just tease us the entire season.
At this point, I mean, there's only 2 episodes left. So he's either in the next one or he's in the last one. I mean, they very directly alluded to him in the 3rd when something happened and they were both like, wasn't me. And then in this one, this is jumping right to the end, but they find Marc finds Steven in a sarcophagus. They continue. There's another sarcophagus with someone trying to get out. And they're like, let Jake out. And they just kept walking.
Yeah, I keep on thinking there's going to be that reveal, and they keep on not giving it to us. So who knows? They're still there. It was towards the very end. They're still in that, maybe a real asylum, maybe not a real asylum. Maybe it's all in his head. Maybe it's a physical place. We'll discuss that a little bit more in the future, well, a little bit later in this episode.
All right, sounds good.
We'll get there. The ending was the most surprising, so we'll end with that.
We'll end with the ending. Good logic. Yeah.
Yeah, so what do you think of the rest of the episode? Anything stick out to you leading up to the going to the tomb?
Yes. So one thing that was very early on, it had the avatar, I believe it was the avatar of Osiris, I think is the one that was carrying Khonshu and putting him on this little display. And it's interesting, as it zooms out, you see other statues that are in displays as well. So Khonshu is the 10th one in that area. So there are 9 prior Egyptian gods that have been turned into those little wooden statues, Khonshu's the 10th. So and at least the 10th, because we know that Ammit was turned into one and was kept elsewhere. So it's clear that the pantheon of Egyptian gods is a lot more than what we've seen thus far.
Yeah.
But for some reason, they've been turning on each other and turning each other into these statues and trapping each other. So you can see that there's at least 10 of them out there.
One thing I tried to do, but the little Shupti, something I forget what they
Shupti, yeah.
The Shuptis were very small on my screen. I
Yes.
tried to pause, tried to look at them, try to figure out which ones are showing there, if there are any ones that we might know, or if there's a one there that may clue us into some secret thing going on. Like if we actually saw like Osiris there and we see a person pretending to be Osiris, I think that would be amazing. But I couldn't tell the difference between a lot of them on my screen. Maybe there's a better, like I could pull it up, like stream it 4K, pause that screen, blow it up, like do some magic. I don't know. I just could not see anything else, and I tried.
Right. Yeah, it's so hard to identify even Khonshu. We know it's Khonshu. And honestly, the only reason I can tell that it's Khonshu is because it has like that weird moon behind him. But other than that, I don't think it really looks like him. So I don't know how I'd be able to identify any of the others without really being able to identify Khonshu by the look.
True. That means that if Marc is able to go and find that statue to bring Khonshu back, he may find a lot of other statues, and I'm curious how he'll interact with those other ones, if he'll just take Khonshu or if he's going to take more than one or all of them. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be a situation. I mean, at this point, he and Khonshu and all them, they're up against these 5 Egyptian gods, because these 5 Egyptian gods have trapped Khonshu. They're not going to let him be free. They free Khonshu. Those 5 are going to rise up. They need more power on their side. Well, there's 9 more there. The numbers would suddenly be in their favor if all the ones that have been trapped are suddenly released, and maybe they're going to turn and trap the 5.
And now here's a thought. We know that Harrow wants to resurrect Ammit, who is a Shupti right now in that little stone Shupti. So Harrow may know the process to bring a god back from a Shupti. Right. My guess is that he's going to try to resurrect Ammit from the Shupti, and Marc will at that point have had the Khonshu that he replaces at the last moment that brings Khonshu back instead of Ammit, using that same spell, ritual, whatever it is. That's my guess.
That'd be good. I hope it happens next episode, though, as kind of missed Moon Knight. Yeah, I want to see a little more of Moon Knight. I don't want Moon Knight and Mr. Knight to suddenly be gone for the rest of the season. And we need Khonshu to have Moon Knight. But that would be good. That'd be great if in the next episode at some point they managed to pull that little switch
now,
thing.
Question. Would you be disappointed if we don't see Ammit at all? Or do you think we have to see Ammit at this point?
I would not be disappointed. But I think if we got to see Ammit, it would definitely add to the experience. Because at this point, we've seen Khonshu's physical form. And as we'll talk about later in this episode, we saw another Egyptian god's physical form. So because we've seen more than one, I feel like the 2 that we've really been following is Khonshu and Ammit. And now we've seen Khonshu and this other one that we've never even heard about before. So at this point, I feel like we kind of have to see Ammit to have the bigger name, have a reveal in there. That said, I wouldn't be disappointed, because they could always phrase it in some way of showing this is still a threat. The unseen threat is often more terrifying than the known threat. And so if they play it that way, they could still pull this off without ever revealing Ammit and leave it open for future seasons.
All right, nice. I agree. I mean, I could see it either way. I feel like I trust Marvel at this point that they are good at doing some writing. So I will trust what they do. I'll judge it when I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that sounds fair.
What else would you like to talk about this episode? I mean, I've got plenty, but throw it over to you.
Okay, well, I don't have anything else from before they enter the tomb. Shall we enter the tomb?
Jump right to the tomb.
Okay, so the one thing I want to talk about, Alexander the Great. Like, honestly, that completely blew my mind, and I was like, okay, they are completely rewriting history for this. But that one I did look up. Apparently, Alexander the Great was a pharaoh. When he was marching around taking over places, he got to Egypt, and at the time, there's some other. Egypt was being controlled by some other group. I'm forgetting the name of it right now. Alexander the Great marched in, took out that other group who was controlling Egypt, and as a thank you for freeing them, they made him pharaoh. That totally. How did I miss that in history class? I just thought that was really interesting. Now, I don't think he was entombed. I mean, I haven't done enough research. Maybe he was. Maybe he was entombed. He was missing. I don't know. But I'm sure they took some creative liberties here. But that was a piece of history that I did not know. So that was an interesting turn that I definitely didn't expect.
Yeah, a lot of shows that do like mythical archaeological stories seem like they take truths and then pull their own explanation behind it. So I imagine there's probably Alexander the Great's tomb. They don't know where they've never found it, so they probably took some liberties here with what they think it would look like. Had him there. The weird part for me is that someone who loves archaeology so much, just destroying archaeological history was so hard to watch in some ways because that like he was amazed with everything he saw. He thought it was so cool, like the Guardian statues and the tomb, and then it's Alexander the Great, and then it was like, I have to rip open the mask off the person, like the mummification garments and cloth, and then break the jaw and shove my hand down to grab the shupti. That's gotta have hurt him to do.
Yeah, I remember watching a documentary about the uncovering of King Tut's tomb, and it was talking about that the dream of for an archaeologist is to come upon a completely untouched tomb or burial site that looters had not gotten to find that was like the holy grail of their whole existence, was to find one of those. He found one of those completely untouched, and he couldn't leave it that way. And the whole thing, like, I feel like it was kind of undersold a little bit, that he was like, everything inside of me is telling me to leave it be. And Marc's like, do you want the guy to get here first, Harrow to get here first? And suddenly he's having to just break things open, rip open the mummy, and it's just like, oh no. Yeah.
That would have been an awesome point for me. Like, I would have seen it like Steven being like, I can't ruin it, and Marc like taking control of his arm and like making him do it. He's like, no, stop. Like, I think that would have been really great, and would have really fit the characters as well. But I know that's been, they do it so much that it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate in some ways. They're like, Alexander the Great's tomb, and now we're gonna move on.
Yeah.
Seems like that's gonna be the case.
Yeah, it does. They move on pretty quick.
Let me ask you, in the tomb, those creature people things.
Yeah.
First of all, this is a very darkly lit episode all around. I watched it during daylight hours. There's lots of glare on my screen, and I'm like, what even are those things? Like, what? They don't, like, I thought they were gonna be like lizard people, like alligator people, kind of like similar to Ammit would be. But they weren't. They were more like mummified priests that were now up and moving around.
Yeah. So they talked a little earlier in the episode about that. They talked about like these guardians that were there to protect the tomb, and these people down here, these must have been some of the victims. I'm guessing that's what that was. It was some of these protectors that were put into this tomb, and through just the magic of this Egyptian lore, they were still alive. Something about it, something down there allowed them to continue on, and they were essentially like these mummified creatures that were still doing their job and trying to protect the tomb. And when Layla rips like the top piece off, like the mask piece off, and it's just this weird fleshy face underneath, and it's just like, okay, so this really is a creature that she's fighting. Yeah. She ripped off his hand, and bones exposed, and it's completely, it's like, okay, great, I've got a blade now I'm going to try and jab you with. It was bizarre.
This show flirts with being a horror genre show.
Mm-hmm.
It flirts with it. I wouldn't really call it horror. It's got elements of horror or like moments of horror. I mean, like the jump scare of her being pulled back into the cave section was, and coming out and being pulled back again, and then coming out again. I mean, very cool. I love that, like, keeps on having these kind of like mythological, fake, not real creatures in it to show what world they're dealing with the whole time. Interestingly, Ammit's cane summons jackals, but there weren't jackals in Ammit's tomb.
Yeah.
Well, Alexander the Great's tomb, but like Ammit's avatar's tomb.
Right.
I thought that was an interesting distinction there, and may mention it in an upcoming video. Okay,
good to know. Well, I don't know if this goes along with your upcoming video, but my thought there, my assumption at this point, once again, this is just me kind of trying to rationalize everything to fit all the puzzle pieces together in my own head, is just that those jackals are being pulled from some other dimension, some other multiverse or something. They're being pulled in from somewhere else. They're alive. Whereas inside that tomb, everything was dead. So Ammit wasn't summoning things to defend the tomb. It's things that were already there. So that's just my guess. I'm sure if Ammit rose and the jackals were part of Ammit, then maybe it would summon it. I don't know, but that's at least the puzzle in my head. That's how that's putting together, but it is up to interpretation.
We never get the full story. I think that's a wonderful thing when it comes to storytelling. It lets you fill in the blanks with whatever makes the most sense for you and whatever you think is the coolest. You're like, it becomes headcanon, and you run with it.
And that's one thing about this episode. This season has been question. It's just been opening up all these weird situations that you don't know what to think. You don't know what exactly is happening. It's been revealing so many questions, but the first 3 episodes is essentially laying a line of questions. This episode felt like it was laying a line of answers, and it was answering so many of those questions. And then it's like, oh wait, we answered too many questions. I threw a whole bunch of questions right back at you at the end. But it was neat. It was kind of nice to see that we are halfway through the season. They're going to start answering some of these questions. Layla's history, for example.
Exactly.
We've been making this guess that Layla's father was one of the archaeologists, that Marc and his mercenary friend, rural Bushmen, that they killed. And so, like, we were theorizing that this was going to follow the way in the comics. Sure enough, it was revealed today. Yes, it is how it was in the comics. So it was good to at least get that confirmation there to get that answer.
And that's, as long as we're trusting what Marc said. If we trust what Marc said, and that's what actually happened, granted, at this point I would, because it took so long of it, him not telling, that eventually him telling. I feel like it's not a lie, it's him actually telling the truth. I mean, him dying and being resurrected for trying to prevent it and everything, that all fits right in. So, confirmation of that ends that, or doesn't end it necessarily. It never ends anything when it comes to comic books, but at least answers that for now.
Yeah, death is a minor inconvenience in comic books.
And they're definitely drawing some interesting relationship changes to Layla and Steven, and Layla and Marc.
Yeah.
Where they're putting more conflict between Marc and her, but like Steven and her, shared a kiss.
Yeah.
There was something there. It's like everything, as we've said before, it's everything that Marc thinks she needs in a person is there. And it was working out until she was like getting really mad at Marc. And what's interesting is that she was mad at Marc, but she was never yelling at Steven. She was only ever yelling at Marc
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the impression I got from that conflict at the end, where like she seemed to be enjoying Steven's company, to enjoying the idea of, great, let's get the personality that I get along with out here that's going to allow me to be a part of this, to go through this journey together. But at the point where her anger got the best of her, it wasn't, is Marc around? Can Marc hear me? It wasn't, Steven, can you translate to Marc? It was going right up into Steven's face and yelling at Marc. Because to her, they are the same person. And to her, that person is Marc. So that's the impression I got from that conflict. And I think it worked. She got Marc to come out.
True. I'm curious what they're going to do moving forward with it, like how much they'll trust, distrust, or help. Because obviously, him being shot, she did not like that. Even if she was upset with him, he still got shot twice in the chest from like 20 feet away.
Yeah.
That is not an easy thing to come back from.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
Which kind of leads us into the next thing I'd want to talk about. But before I get into the post being shot, anything else you want to talk about for the tomb itself?
Sure. So so prior to the shot type of thing, one thing I want to bring up, Abdullah al-Fauli. So we have her father's full name. So I was like, great, we have a name, and if this show has shown us anything, that every name means something. Like the minorest of characters was given a name that corresponds to someone in the comics, usually someone very unrelated or like a minor role in the comics, like someone that is not very large. But I was trying to find Abdullah al-Fauli. I didn't recognize the name, but I did find an Abdul Faul, who is the Scarlet Scarab. So once again, we do have a connection between a name and a hero with an Egyptian origin as the Scarlet Scarab. So now he died, so we're not going to see the Scarlet Scarab. But it is interesting that they gave him the name of a hero whose superhero name is the Scarlet Scarab, and who called his daughter My Little Scarab.
Yeah.
So it was just an interesting thing. I just wanted to touch on that, because anytime that they give you a name or some specific detail like that, you know, that's the type of thing you gotta look up.
Definitely.
Okay, let's move on to the shot.
So I think the episode itself changed drastically from pre-shot to post-shot.
Mm-hmm.
So we see Marc get shot twice in the chest, or Steven. I forget who actually was in. I think Steven was in control again. Right?
No, it was Marc.
It was Marc. Okay.
Yeah.
Shot twice in the chest by Arthur Harrow. Like seeing him be violent again. Usually he has other people do the job, but he did it that time. And Steven falls down, and then we cut. And it's that weird TV show, different style filming. It's like that. When you film something for a show to make it look like it's a show, kind of like campy style of shooting it.
Purposefully having bad cinematography.
Right.
Yeah.
And we see that, and then it goes, and they say Dr. Stephen Grant is the character, and then we cut to the asylum, where we've been talking about it maybe coming this whole time.
And I do want to say, he really got shot in the chest. Like, that was one thing I was trying to watch. Like, he gets shot, and I was like, okay, what's the catch? He gets shot again. I'm like, okay, that's two, both in the chest. Is he wearing some sort of armor or something? But he falls in the water. He's got the two holes with red starting to come out. And it's like, okay, he really got shot twice in the chest. That's not something like, that's typically when you're killing off a character, you want to make sure that they've been killed off. 2 shots to the chest will typically do it.
No Moon Knight outfit to heal either.
Right. But it was interesting because he falls into the water, and you see him in the water with hard ground underneath him. And then the camera pivots to be underneath him, and he starts sinking down when there was ground beneath him just a moment before. So there's something off about that whole sequence. And then, wakes up apparently in an asylum.
And I don't know if you noticed, the two orderlies were the two pretend cops that worked for Arthur Harrow. We saw plenty all over the place of the different aspects that he might have seen for like a Khonshu drawing, like a person drawing a bird that has a Khonshu's skull. Moon Knight action figure. We see they're playing bingo. There's a whole bunch of stuff there.
Yeah.
That would be what would his story of like the things he's been pretending to see or not really seeing if he was actually in an asylum.
Yeah, everything out of the goldfish was even in there. So, yeah.
But it was very quick from being in the asylum to him realizing that it's not real.
And that surprised me. When they cut to the asylum, I'm like, oh man, this is huge. This is where they're going to end the episode. They're going to leave us wondering for a week. Was everything real? Was everything fake? But they didn't.
Yeah, so we have Arthur Harrow stepping in as like the psychologist, doctor, talking to him very calmly, patiently with a mustache. But the reflection was still showing him with his sandals, which was interesting. It was like the cracks of reality showing, even if this isn't a real place, is a real place. Like, we don't really know. Like, it could be an actual, like, in his head place, or it could be a real place. We don't know yet. I feel like it might be in his head right now.
Yeah.
Because he's dying. He wasn't like taken there to bring somewhere else to break him or anything like that. I feel like this currently is in his head, but there's really not any proof there for me.
Yeah. So when Harrow showed up in the episode and was talking with them, my thought was, okay, this is some power we haven't seen before that Harrow has. My guess at that point was Steven, when it was Steven, must have hid the Ammit wooden figurine somewhere. Harrow shot him, couldn't find it. So they got the body, and he was doing something, entering the consciousness to try and get a location out of Marc. And that could be.
Could be.
It's an ability we haven't seen before, but like there are some clues there as to him having some sense of control. Like he says, he kind of hints at it a little bit when he says to Marc, we don't live in a material world, we live in a psychic world. Now he's saying that as if it's just a therapist trying to give some advice about the way to view life, but I think he was talking about at that very moment. We don't live in a material world. This is not the material world. This is a psychic world, not a mental world, not a metaphysical world. It was a psychic world, and psychic tends to have a connotation of a connection. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking that this was something that Harrow constructed, maybe in just kind of an inception type of thing. He constructed this world to try and separate Marc out, make Marc think he's just been crazy this whole time, and try and get Marc to tell the story of his imagination and figure out where this figurine is.
Interesting. I'm not sure.
And the cracks could be Marc's thoughts, filling in some blanks and giving him enough clues.
I'm not sure when he would have had time to hide the Shepti, but I could see that being the case, is them trying to like interrogate or get psychically in there to like shut him down, whatever it may be. I could definitely see that be the case.
Yeah. The only thought I could have on where to hide it is when Layla was up right in Steven's face arguing, he could have slipped it into her bag.
Yeah.
Not trusting Marc, not trusting the situation, just decided this thing's safest with Layla. I'm going to give it to her.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, we did mention previously about the whole sarcophagi being in the asylum and it housing different personalities. Interestingly, Marc was the base person. He was the person in the wheelchair to start off with. Then they found in a sarcophagus Steven, an alternate personality, not the original person. This is the new personality created. And then the other one which we were thinking would be Jake,
Yeah.
unopened currently.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see it opened. At this point, I don't even believe it's going to happen. I'm like,
No.
they keep teasing us. Who knows? We'll
Yeah.
see it when
We're not going to see Jake, at least not in that world. I don't think we're going to see Jake since he's in that sarcophagus. He's not getting out at this point. Nobody let him out. I think they're moving on. I think that was the hint of, look, there's more personalities, but they're not showing up right now.
Now, a question I had when I was watching, I was trying to see if I could find any clues to this is, do other rooms have other personalities as well? Was that the Jake personality? But there's a bunch of rooms there. I mean, we saw other people.
Mm-hmm.
So we can assume that either that's the trying to fill it in, make it seem real, or they have their own rooms. But it would be curious to know, are there other rooms there that have other personalities in them? We won't know. I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, so I didn't notice any other rooms. After we found the first room, I was looking for other rooms. So when, of course, they came up with the one sarcophagus that was moving around, I was like, okay, there's another one. The only thing I can think of is he ran down that hall for a while before he came to Steven's room. So he ran down one hall, got to the end, started running down the other hall, and then after a little while running down one, then he cuts into a room. So I don't know how many rooms he could possibly have passed in that sprint down the hall at the beginning. So who knows? But once again, we know of at least 3.
And now, just to start rounding out our discussion, the big thing that happened at the end, we have Steven and Marc, who met each other as separate bodies, running down a hallway, opening this door, and this hippo lady, very friendly, says hi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had to look up this character.
Me too.
Tawaret.
Yes.
So I again, like I said at the beginning, passing knowledge of Egyptian mythology.
Mm-hmm.
This is not something that was in my Egyptian knowledge. I had to look up who Tawaret is. And what was interesting, as I read a lot about the character, or in mythology, is there's relationships between Tawaret and Hathor, where I believe the thing I found online was saying about how there are times where Hathor appears as Tawaret and Tawaret appears as Hathor, as well as Isis and other gods. And so it's definitely Tawaret. Different actress, for a different voice. Like, I don't think Hathor and Tawaret are the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that it's possible Hathor sent Tawaret to help Steven / Marc.
Yeah, it could be. It definitely seemed friendly and positive and not going after them. It is also interesting. So Tawaret was not one of the 5 that showed up for that trial earlier on. So we know Tawaret at least wasn't one of the ones that condemned that whole situation. Also, Tawaret is associated with the flooding of the Nile and at times with the rejuvenation of the dead. Well, this is the dead. Like, we just saw Marc get shot.
In water and dead.
Exactly. So this is the person you want by your side at a time like that.
So twice shot in the chest, probably should be dead, falls into water, gets into this mindscape area where meets the god of like flooding waters and rejuvenation and rebirth and everything. Sounds like that's how he's coming back. Tawaret is going to guide him out of this mindscape, which will make him go and not be shot in the chest anymore. That's got to be what's going to happen.
Yeah. I can see that. I honestly don't see another way of him making it out of there at this point. Then some Egyptian god has mercy on him. He somehow pleads a case and proves himself. And Tawaret now is right there. So, yeah.
Well, we've got 2 more episodes to go in this series, and right afterwards is another Marvel, and then right after that is another Marvel, and right after that's another Marvel. So we are going to have a bunch to discuss over the next several months.
It is
but we
exciting
are
time.
good and past what we try, like our 30 minutes. We try to wrap everything up and put it in for this discussion. So, final thoughts. What did you think of the episode?
It was not what I was expecting. It felt a little more like like the Mummy, like the movie from like the 90s, I think it was. It felt a little more like that, with these like creatures coming around, like these mummified creatures, and a little bit of like kind of that situation where it's like exploring the tombs. It didn't feel as much like a superhero story as an explorer story. I enjoyed it, but it was more of just like wondering what's going to happen to these characters that I build up such a relationship with at this point. And then that twist at the end was just like, it blew my mind. So I don't know what's happening right now, but I did enjoy the episode. I enjoyed finally getting some of these answers. And that's what, as I said in one of our previous discussions, that's what I was hoping for. I wanted, in the latter half of the season, I wanted to get some answers. I want to have some semblance of knowing what the heck is happening here. And we got some of that.
Yep.
So it's going to be a hard week.
I think this was I love this episode. The weird thing is, the first time that there was no like actual like Moon Knight costume style stuff in it at all. I think episode 1 may not have had it either, but it's the full episode of it's just the people. It's what Marvel loves to do. They develop the people behind the mask, have them be real people, make you feel for them. And yeah, I do agree. It was very Indiana Jonesy, Mummy style. I loved it. It was right up my alley. I thought it was very cool. Love the ending. I mean, maybe it's because it's more of like a expectation fulfillments with this episode, but I enjoyed every part of it. I'm super excited to watch this episode multiple times. And Marvel has a good track record of the start of second half of seasons being fantastic. Loki, and WandaVision, especially, like those two, the start of their second halves, I loved those episodes. So they just continue starting towards that conclusion really well.
Yeah. Look forward to the last 2 weeks. It's amazing that there's only 2 episodes left. We're already there.
Definitely. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another discussion on Moon Knight. We'll be discussing plenty of things in the future, and we were going to be discussing things that even came out just recently right after this. I have more videos for you, more discussions. Thank you for joining us.